Hi, and welcome to our audiobook series brought to you by Burgapoly Publishing. Let the journey begin. Today we are presenting
Chapter 10, A New Threat. Before anyone could respond, a scream ripped through the silence. A shriek of terror, followed by a sickening thud against the wall. Then gurgling, and then nothing. The air turned still. No one breathed. Then came the sound. A deep rolling purr. Rough. Thick. Alive. It wasn't human. Pots clattered to the floor beyond the door. Heavy breathing. Slow. Deliberate. A shadow. Something immense blocked the light beneath the doorframe. A pause. Then, sniffing. The deep, rhythmic inhale of something hunting. A chittering call, alien and unsettling. Then, scratching. John's stomach turned to ice. The door bowed inward, cracking under the sudden impact of something slamming against it. The group jumped back. "This door won't last long," John shouted. "Help me brace it." The three guys threw their weight against the wood as another impact rocked the room. The doorframe splintered. The force knocked them backward. They scrambled, pressing against it once more. Scratching sounds, deep, methodical. Tom's voice was tight. "They're clawing their way in." John's mind raced. "The windows are too small to crawl through." He turned to the others. "Can you find anything to pry up the floorboards? These buildings are on stilts. We might be able to crawl underneath." Chi and Valerie frantically searched. Another impact sent dust raining from the ceiling. "I think I found something," Valerie cried, holding up a knife. John gestured toward the sink. "The boards look rotted there. Start digging." Valerie dove to the floor, stabbing the blade between the planks, wedging it in deeper. Chi shoved boxes aside, her hands trembling. Then her fingers brushed against metal. She pulled back, revealing a red hand truck. She turned to John, her voice quick. "If we wedge this between the boards, we might be able to pry one up." John's eyes darted to the door, then back to her. "That could work." Another impact. The door split, wood cracking down the center. The purring stopped. Something beyond the door sniffed again, longer this time. Then with a terrible stillness, it let out a slow, guttural growl. The hunt was nearly over, and the door was its final barrier. John ran to Chi. "Let's do it, now!" John drove the hand truck's edge deeper into the crack between the wooden planks, the splintering sound barely audible over the chaos unfolding behind them. A piece of the board cracked loose, widening the gap, but it wasn't enough. "Chi, I need your weight on this end," John said, breath coming in short, measured bursts. "We have to pry again." Behind them, the door convulsed under another impact. A claw, dark and hooked, punched through the wood. "Yow!" Tom yelped, stumbling back. "They're getting through!" Tom and Scott scrambled clear as the claw retracted, only to be replaced by another, longer, more desperate. John and Chi pulled hard. The board groaned, then snap, it came loose. "You did it!" Valerie gasped. John barely acknowledged her. "One board's up, but it's not wide enough. Again." Scott was already moving. "We need to slow them down." Tom nodded, and together they started shoving crates against the door, piling them up in a frantic barricade. The momentary pause in the assault wouldn't last. "They're shredding the door!" Tom shouted, voice raw with fear. "We're running out of time!" John and Chi yanked at the second board. It gave. Almost. Then the hand truck snapped. The sudden loss of resistance sent them both tumbling backward. Chi hit the ground, clutching her elbow with a sharp gasp. "What happened?" she groaned. John grabbed the broken tool, running his eyes over the jagged edge. The hand truck broke. Chi sat up, eyes darting toward the door. The snarling, the scraping, the waiting was over. They were coming through. "So what do we do now?" John turned the broken frame in his hands, then flipped it. The base was gone, but the handle was intact. "This part's still good," he muttered. "Let's try again." They wedged the metal beneath another board. John threw his weight into it, Chi beside him, bouncing, forcing the stubborn plank to loosen. Then pop! "We did it!" Chi gasped. John barely wasted a second before plunging his head through the opening, scanning the crawl space beneath the building. No movement, no shadows. "Okay, go," he ordered. "Valerie, you first." Chi slid through without hesitation. Valerie hesitated, just for a second, but John nudged her forward. Now! Scott turned to him, gripping his shoulder. I'm Scott, by the way. His grip was firm, but his fear was real. John, he said back. They clasped hands briefly before Scott lunged through the opening, disappearing beneath the building. The creatures on the other side of the door felt their prey slipping away. Their agitation reached a fevered peak. The clawed scratching turned into violent tearing. The door wouldn't hold. It's just you and me, buddy, Tom said, glancing at John. His attempt at bravado wavered. 2 heroes against the world. John's response was instant. Drop through, now! Tom nodded, scrambling through the hole. John turned, just in time to see the door explode, pushing all the crates over. John stumbled, barely keeping his footing as the full weight of the dinosaur surged into the room. It locked onto him immediately. John ran and lunged toward the hole, but the falling debris blocked his escape. The dinosaur's gaze snapped downward, a low rumbling growl. John's heart slammed against his ribs. It climbed onto the pile of collapsed crates, its claws sinking deep into the wood, unstable but advancing. John twisted, grabbed the nearest box, and threw it. The impact struck the creature's shoulder. It stumbled, losing its footing, crashing backward. But another sound. A second dinosaur shoving its way through the wreckage. It saw John and saw its companion flailing. And for a breath, they looked at each other. Then, as if deciding together, they turned their heads in unison toward him. A predator's acknowledgement. John had never felt so small. John! Tom's voice from below. John wrenched himself free, shoving debris out of the way, diving through the hole just as the first dinosaur lunged, its jaws snapping closed on empty air. He hit the ground hard, crawling, scrambling back. The creatures shoved their heads into the opening, jaws gnashing, furious at their lost meal. But the opening was too small and they couldn't reach. They bellowed their rage. The newly freed group scurried on their hands and knees toward the outer edge of the building, their breath coming in short, ragged gasps. Chie turned to John, eyes wide. What happened up there? Tom answered before John could speak. John almost ended up being lunch. John exhaled, and for the first time since entering the camp, he realized his hands were shaking. Something skittered across Chie's hand, a fleeting, almost imperceptible touch. Her breath hitched. Something just crawled on me, she hissed, shaking her hand violently. Oh man, what's on my head? Tom yelped, clawing at his hair, fingers tangling in his own panic. John leaned closer, squinting in the dim light beneath the building. Come into the light more. Scott reached out, his movements deliberate, fingers searching through the mess of Tom's hair. Ow, ow! You're pulling my hair, Tom whined. What is it? Scott yanked something free. He barely glimpsed at it before he flung it into the open. The thing twisted, struggling to right itself. A writhing brown mass, segmented, glistening in the half-light. It was the size of a hand, its many legs undulating as it scuttled across the dirt, seeking cover. A millipede, but wrong. Too thick, too fast. It hesitated in the slanting beams of sunlight. Chie recoiled, her voice a barely contained shriek. It's coming back! With eerie precision, it rushed back toward them. Tom jumped, scrambling sideways. Look out! They pressed themselves against the wooden stilts of the structure, watching as the thing slithered into the deeper shadows, disappearing into the darkness beneath the building. Scott exhaled slowly and measured. It seems they avoid sunlight. They hide in the cooler darkness under here. John stiffened. He pointed. Don't look now, but I think we stirred them up. The ground beneath them shifted. A dozen shapes, maybe more, rippled in the darkness, slithering, undulating. More of the creatures, their many legs clicking faintly against the damp wood. Tom clenched his jaw. Yeah, I think we need to get out of here. John kept his voice level. In case you don't remember, we're still on the menu for a bunch of dinosaurs. We can't just stroll out into the open. Scott studied the creatures in the dirt. I'm not sure what they eat, he admitted, but considering the primitive nature of this planet, they could be scavengers, flesh eaters. He hesitated, then added, soft tissue. Tom's face twisted. What do you mean by soft tissue? John touched his own arm. This stuff. Tom gulped. That's what I thought you meant. John peered out from under the building, scanning the clearing beyond. The air was still, no movement, no shadows shifting between structures. I don't see anything, he whispered. Then after a beat, I'm going to look around, see if the coast is clear. Chi tensed. Be careful. And hurry, Scott added. John rose to his feet, moving with deliberate caution. He stepped away from the building. Slow, steady. Every nerve in his body was listening to the wind, to the creak of unseen wood, to the ambient wrongness of the silent jungle beyond the compound. Something shifted inside the ruined house. A low rustling. John barely had time to turn his head before one of the smaller dinosaurs emerged onto the porch. It stopped, turned, and snapped its head around. It saw him, its head tilted and its pupils narrowed. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. John could feel his pulse behind his eyes. The creature raised its head. It let out a chittering call, its throat vibrating. A summons. It jumped down and ran, cutting off his escape. John's muscles coiled, trapped. Two more dinosaurs emerged. First, the slinking, predatory step. Then the sharp glance from side to side, reading the environment, assessing him. The first dinosaur barked at the others. A command. They jumped down. John ran. He bolted toward the nearest structure, lungs burning with the effort of sheer survival. Then, something bigger moved. John's instincts screamed before he saw it. One of the giants emerging from behind a building, its massive form shifting between light and shadow. It saw him. It wanted him. John's feet barely touched the ground as he lunged onto the porch. The moment he did, something rushed past him. The smaller dinosaurs. But they weren't chasing him anymore. The big one had changed the rules. John barely turned in time to see the real predators turn tail, scrabbling for the safety of the other house. The giant dinosaur let out a guttural snort, snapping its jaws at one of them, just missing. John stood there, breath ragged, heart hammering. He had only survived because something bigger had wanted his killers more. A twisted sort of mercy. And he knew the only reason he wasn't dead yet was because it was still deciding if he was worth the chase. The behemoth exhaled, a low guttural sound, nostrils flaring as it studied the smaller dinosaurs scrambling for safety. It hesitated as though weighing its hunger against its frustration. John seized the moment. He motioned sharply for the others to move. Still crawling beneath the building, they crept as close as they could to the structure next door. One by one they emerged, their bodies unfolding from the tight confines of the crawl space, darting into the narrow space between buildings, hidden for the moment from the chaos around them. They didn't stop. They ran for the front porch. From the next building over, the massive predator continued to probe the windows, its breath fogging the glass and its footsteps' rhythmic thud vibrating through the wood. There was a roar coming from behind them. John twisted, his stomach clenching. The other giant dinosaur was charging toward them. It had seen them. I strongly suggest we get inside, Tom blurted. John reached for the door, turned the knob. It didn't budge. This isn't the time to be fooling around, Tom barked. John shoved against the door. I'm not fooling around. It's stuck. Tom backed up a few paces. All right, together on 3. Scott's voice cut through the urgency. We don't have 3 seconds. Fine, now. John and Tom kicked in unison. The door frame splintered, shards of wood flying in all directions. Inside, now! John barely had time to shove Chie and the others inside before the dinosaur lunged. Its massive head swung low, jaws snapping, just missing John as he threw himself through the threshold. The beast's head slid across the porch, its momentum carrying it forward, only to slam against the porch roof. It thrashed, and the entire building shook. Tom stared, wide-eyed. What's it doing? The dinosaur twisted, writhing, its limbs jerking against the confined space, roaring in outrage. The wood beneath them groaned. Then, collapse. The front porch gave way. The creature rolled, the structure breaking around it in a cascade of debris. John grabbed Chi's arm, pulling her back as the front of the building caved in. The dinosaur roared again, thrashing violently, its tail whipping across the wreckage. Then in a final surge, it heaved the roof off its back and staggered upright, shaking dust and wood splinters from its thick hide. It paused and looked around. The fury in its posture faded, replaced by something colder, more calculating, like it was waiting. The front room was gone. The group barely escaped into the back, breathless, their bodies coated in dust and sweat. John exhaled. "Everyone okay?" A moment. Then, "Yeah."
Thanks for listening to Chapter 10 of Into the 6th Millennium, The Invasion of Zephro. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss future audiobooks. You'll find links below to get the book, explore more titles from the series, and grab official merch. We've also included some affiliate links to the tools we use to bring this project to life.